Hello and thanks for tuning in to our second part of Top Tips for Expats in Brazil. I'm joined here by Apollo, who has an important piece of advice to share with everybody. What was that? I agree, totally agree. Apollo says, be happy and remember to take pleasure in the simple things of life, right? And remember exactly why we're doing financial planning in the first place. Thank you, Apollo. Valuable advice. I think Apollo should take over the channel, actually. Anyway, on that note, let's get started with more top tips for expats. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful view behind me of Sugarloaf Mountain, and what a view it is to discuss tax season. Yes, we are currently in Brazilian tax reporting season, which runs from the 1st of March to the 30th of April. This is called the Imposto de Renda de Pessoa Física, so the IRPF 2021. And it's based on the previous calendar year. So in this case, calendar year 2020. So who's required to submit a Brazilian tax return? Who's required to submit the IRPF? Well, let's talk about it from the perspective of expats and long-term foreign residents in Brazil. So let me give you 4 examples. There are more, but let me just give you the most common 4. Firstly, if your income has been 28,559 reals over the course of 2020. Secondly, if you've had exempt income of 40,000. So if you've received exempt income of 40,000. Now, what is exempt? Tax exempt income could be FGTS, or it could be income which has been taxed at source. So even though that income is not taxable, again, it's already been taxed at source, you're still required to submit a tax return declaring all of that income. So that's 40,000 for income which is already been taxed at source or is classified as tax exempt. Thirdly, if you've got 300,000 Brazilian reals worth of assets in Brazil or outside, the sum of assets has got to be 300,000. If it's 300 or above, you're required to declare. That doesn't apply to income, that's just your total assets. That's got to be submitted as information and included in your tax return. And you're also required to submit a tax return if you've made a capital gain. So in Portuguese, that's a ganho do capital. If you've made a capital gain over the course of 2020, you're required to report that and submit a tax return. Now, a key point, which I have mentioned in previous videos, if it's your first time that you're submitting your tax return in Brazil, if you're not very confident about how to complete it, it is quite cumbersome for some people. Some people breeze through it. Some people think, okay, well, I'm not sure. We always recommend you seek professional help for your first tax return. And then, yes, you can DIY it. You can do it yourself. There's no problem with that. But the first one, it's a good idea to get it right and just have that as a base for future tax returns. So the link to download the program is in the description of this YouTube video. Have a look at it. And then, yes, if you're not sure, definitely seek a qualified accountant to help you with that. So in the program, you'll see options for modelo completo or simplificado. Now, what does that mean? The simple return is where you just declare your income and there are no deductibles. And the complete version is when you have got deductions like, for example, expenses on education, health, and a few other items. So they are deductibles. The program will show you which is more favorable for you. So it'll show you the complete and the simple versions, and you can choose between them. And regarding income and assets, let me reiterate, I've mentioned this in articles on our website and in previous videos on the Ipanema Wealth YouTube page. You'll see all of them. I've mentioned it several times that you must declare global income. So if you're living here and you're earning overseas, you're meant to declare that. Some of it may be taxable or it may not be taxable. That depends on double tax treaties. So you've got to check that out. But you are required to declare it. And you can obtain tax credits if it's already been taxed elsewhere. And regarding assets, a lot of people fall into this trap. They have assets in Brazil and they declare them, or they have bank accounts, trading accounts, properties outside Brazil, and they they don't declare it, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Receita Federal, so the tax authorities here, require that you declare your global assets here. So global income, global assets have to be declared on the IRPF. So good luck with that. Any questions, get in touch via our website. And welcome to the historic center of Rio. Behind me, we have the Arches of Lapa, worth checking out if you're in Rio. So let's talk about the Central Bank Declaration. The Central Bank Declaration, the DCBE, the Declaração de Capitais e Bens no Exterior, that's a separate declaration to the Imposto de Renda, the tax return. Now, this is merely a requirement to state your assets, to list your assets if the total value of overseas assets is above the equivalent of $1 million US. Last year, the rule was $100,000. So for anyone with 200,000, 300,000, you don't have to worry about this anymore. This only applies to individuals with more than the equivalent of $1 million US. And you'll see the link to the article we put out about this change and the link to the Banco Central website in the description here of this video. This asset declaration is not to be confused with the assets section of your tax return. If you have, for example, 20,000 reals or $20,000 or whatever, you have several accounts or properties, those must all be listed in the assets section of your tax return. If you've got more than $1 million of overseas assets, they go into this separate central bank declaration, and you'll see the link to all of this in the description. Okay, hope that was clear. This area is called Porto Maravilha, and the bridge behind me goes from Rio to Niterói on the other side of the Guanabara Bay. Let's talk about fund platforms, Brazilian fund platforms. In part 1 of this video, tips 1 to 5 for expats, I spoke about desbancarização. I love that word. So it's the word which is used to describe the movement away from traditional banks for other financial services. And the main part, as far as I'm concerned, as far as long-term financial planning is concerned, the main part of that really is the movement of asset management towards other providers. In this case, we prefer fund platforms, which allow advisors to give clients a suitable portfolio, a portfolio based on their suitability, so their life objectives and their risk profile. A fund platform is essentially an investment account. You can even call it a trading account, but we prefer to think of a fund platform as a longer-term concept where an advisor will design a tailor-made solution, which is dynamic over the course of the client's financial planning timeline. And it's open architecture in format. And what does open architecture mean? Fancy term. It means that most assets, pretty much all assets that you would want to consider for your financial planning, can be held on this fund platform. So investment funds, treasuries, all kind of fixed income products, ETFs, direct shares of companies, all sorts of funds. And the fund platform will allow your financial advisor to design a portfolio for you based on your risk profile and personal financial objectives. So a highly recommended solution to anyone who's serious about their financial planning. Another key advantage is cost. They are generally cheaper than using your traditional bank for an asset management solution. I wouldn't even call it a solution, to be honest. They're usually off-the-shelf, ready-made funds, which are not that tailored in nature, and they're a lot more expensive as well. So just imagine if, with a fund platform, you can obtain a 0.5% saving in cost and a 1.5% increase in return without necessarily increasing the risk. So you could continue being conservative if that's what you want. But let's take, for example, this is not a guarantee, but it's quite a likely outcome that you can save 0.5% and gain 1.5% or thereabouts. Think about the impact of that over, let's say, 10 years or 20 years. So over 10 years, you could obtain with that 2% compounding, 0.5 plus 1.5. So if you compound 2% over 10 years, you could get close to 22% extra at the end of that 10 years. And over 20 years, you'd be talking about a 48% increase in total net return. So worth thinking about, really. And for the next point, I have chosen the background of Guarachiba. And if you keep going back, you keep going south, you'll get to Ilha Grande, then you'll get to Parachi, and then you'll get to the state of São Paulo. Anyway, let's talk about international asset consolidation. It's something which I really enjoy, and it adds a lot of value to expatriate clients in Brazil and beyond in Latin America. Something which we've done a lot of, and it's been life-changing for a lot of our clients. And many clients, especially in oil and gas and mining and other industries, they tend to travel a lot. They live in one country, move to another after, let's say, 3 years after every expat assignment. And let's say after 3 or 4 assignments, their assets can be in a little bit of a mess because these people are busy. They're busy executives. They're not just moving from one location to another. They're also working on irregular shifts, and they're traveling within those locations. So, you've also got the family responsibilities. So it's not uncommon for their financial planning or lack of planning, to just get out of control. So we find that a lot of these international types, these jet set types, have an account in one country, a portfolio in another country, then they have several accounts and they lose track of what they have. And their money is not really working in their favor. It's all quite messy, and it can also be quite expensive because they're paying for costs, in each different pot of money. So the idea of international asset consolidation is exactly that. It's bringing it together under one umbrella. And the type of umbrella depends on the amount. It depends on the tax residence and tax citizenship of the individual. So there are several solutions. It could be an international fund platform. So what I described earlier in the context of Brazil, an international fund platform is exactly that. It's an international investment account where you've got open architecture. So open architecture across global exchanges, ETFs, investment funds, fixed income, hedge funds. So you can hold pretty much anything from a recognized exchange on that international fund platform. And let's say you have an account in, let's say you've got an account in Germany or France. With many international fund platforms in tax neutral jurisdictions or offshore financial centers, you can migrate the custody over. You don't need to encash and then buy those assets again. You can migrate them. It really depends where you're holding those assets, where those pots of money are. So you can bring them into an international fund platform or an international portfolio bond, which is a wrapper. It's a wrapper which holds your investment within a life assurance structure. Or for larger amounts, I recommend offshore holding companies, but it really depends on the client. But offshore holding companies can hold a wider variety of assets, including property, in a variety of jurisdictions. So that's where you need financial planning advice from an independent perspective to really understand where your assets are, what your reporting requirements are, and then having a solution designed such that you can structure yourself in a tax efficient way and in a compliant way based on where you're living and where you're reporting to. And also, most important thing is achieving your life goals using those instruments in your favor. And what of you to talk about our final point about insurance, about reviewing your insurance requirements, which is a necessary part of financial housekeeping. This is Lagoa looking over Ipanema. It's one of my favorite views in the universe. So let's talk about insurance, shall we? We believe that all risks should be categorized and prioritized collectively. What happens in the event of your death? Will your family have sufficient funds? What if you've got kids? What if you've got young kids who need their education provided for? What happens in the event of critical illness or disability? It's worth considering all of the possible risks and ensuring that you've got cover for those risks. Now, if you work for an international employer, especially on an expat contract, the chances are that your employer has, let's say, got your back or has largely covered for any of those eventualities? Or what happens in transition? Let's say you move from an expat contract to a local contract. Will that cover still apply? What happens in the event of redundancies? Let's say if you want to stay in Brazil or wherever you're based after an expat assignment comes to an end, or you could be managing your own business or working for a local employer, or just here long term, enjoying life. It's worth looking at all of these risks and making sure that you're covered. We find that a lot of people who are here on a long-term basis make, I would call it a catastrophic mistake of having an insurance product purchased from, let's say, the UK. For a British person living here, they purchased international medical insurance in the UK or international travel insurance in the UK, and they think that will cover all risks in Brazil or anywhere else in South America. That's not the case. If you've left UK residency, and if you're no longer a UK resident, that cover will no longer be applicable. Take the subject of health plans in Brazil. I've met a lot of expats and long-term foreign residents here in Brazil who think that their overseas travel insurance will cover them. Well, it may cover them for serious medical emergencies or serious illnesses, but minor emergencies and checkups, they won't be covered. They'll have very high excesses and additional costs. They may not even be covered at all. So health plans in Brazil will cover those regular checkups. So you've got to see how long are you going to be here for. And it doesn't just apply to Brazil. What I'm saying applies to most countries in the world, most countries in South America. You might need a local plan if you're here on a long-term basis and you want medical cover for all levels of emergency. So those international plans tend to cover more serious accidents and emergencies. So be careful with that and understand what policy you've purchased and what it covers. One thing I'd like to talk about is universal life insurance policies. They belong in the 1980s. They don't have any place in modern day financial planning. Universal life policies combine an investment element and an insurance element. And the pricing is it's all over the place. There's no point. I would say if you want to invest, buy a good investment product. If you want to have insurance, buy a good insurance product. Do not mix the two. And again, a link to that point is in the description of this video. But universal life policies have no place in modern financial planning. They're expensive. They don't achieve either goal. So stay well away from them. So here we are, sunset over Ipanema Beach. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you've liked it, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you'd like to get in touch, do so via the contact page on our website. Take care and all the best for 2021. Cheers.